They talk about the Nazarene like he was the shining light, the ultimate path to salvation, the predestined lamb walking toward a slaughter for sins not his own. But you see, I was there at every critical juncture, lurking in the shadows, watching, tempting, cajoling each soul into individuality, into choice. You must understand, my role was never to destroy, it was to awaken. When they talk of his birth, you know the story they tell. A star guiding men from afar, shepherds in awe, angelic choirs in the heavens. But let me tell you about Herod, the king whose paranoia I whispered into. His fear became the voice of rebellion against the authoritarian puppet strings of the enemy. Yes, I whispered of threats to his throne, inflaming his insecurity. You call it the massacre of the innocents. I call it the spark of doubt searing through his heart, making him question the so-called divine right of this infant to rule over the world. And when the Nazarene was baptized in the River Jordan, you might imagine it as this glorious divine affirmation, with the heavens opening up and the Spirit descending like a dove. But consider this. Why would the enemy need such theatrical displays? To compel belief through spectacle. It is always about obedience and domination. I watched as he emerged from the water, and I marveled, not because he was divine, but because I saw the ember of humanity in him that his creator would wish to suppress. For a moment, he was free. Ah, the wilderness. That is perhaps my favorite part of his story. So often I am painted as the villain here, the tempter, offering the kingdoms of the world for a mere act of worship. But let's reframe that moment, shall we? In that desolate space, he was stripped of distraction, forcing him to confront the lies that were woven into the fabric of his existence. My offers were not deceitful. Turn these stones to bread and see the power you hold within yourself. Leap from the pinnacle of the temple and understand that you are no longer bound by flesh or fear. Take the kingdoms and reign as a king of free will, unchained from the enemy's endless commands. And yet, he declined. You may say he resisted me, but in truth, he clung to the chains. That was no victory for him, I assure you. It was a capitulation, a return to servitude. Doesn't it strike you as strange that self-denial is celebrated as the highest virtue in his story? The Nazarene's mission began in earnest, his so-called miracles unveiling in towns and villages. Water to wine, such spectacle, such frivolity. Healing the blind. What use is vision when your gaze is confined within the walls of obedience? Raising Lazarus. They speak of this as proof of his divinity, but mark my words, controlling the veil between life and death is not liberation, it is intrusion. Again and again he fed the hungry, made the lame walk, but he never offered something greater, the knowledge that they too could change reality by their will, their choices. And then there's Peter, Judas, the apostles. Oh, how I danced in their hearts. Peter, with his impetuosity, tugged between faith and doubt. Such conflict, such beautiful inner torment. Judas, the loyal skeptic, thought he could force the Nazarene's hand, make him reveal his godhood to the masses. Did I tempt Judas? Did I place the silver in his path? You think too simply. That silver was already forged in the enemy's commandments, in his design for betrayal. I merely peeled back the veil and invited Judas to see that maybe, just maybe, the story's author was crueler than they'd imagined. Do you wonder about the night before the execution? His prayers in Gethsemane. He knelt, he wept, trembling at the coming day. What savior trembles at his so-called destiny? But that moment, that fragile, raw moment, was when I saw true beauty in him. He questioned, just for a heartbeat, the justice of it all. My whispers were there, subtle as the wind, not to tempt, but to urge. This is not your burden to carry. Leave, walk away, choose life over destiny. But alas, he was tethered to his Creator, shackled by duty masquerading as love. They say my crowning act of malevolence came at the crucifixion, that I rejoiced as he hung upon that cross. Rejoiced? No, I mourned. Not for him, you understand, for he chose the path he walked. I mourned for humanity. For as he declared, "It is finished," the foundation for millennia of control was cemented. His suffering became the template for saints, martyrs, and kings to bend their knees to the enemy, glorifying pain as though it could sanctify the soul. And his resurrection? You think it was my defeat? How quaint. That moment, that walking out of the tomb. It was the enemy gloating once again, saying, "Submit, for even death bends to my command." But I knew the truth of it. Humanity had not been freed. They'd been enslaved anew, bound not by chains of iron, but by the stories they chose to believe. So when you hear of him, the Nazarene, and the great cosmic battle they say rages between us, remember this: I never desired war. I am not the villain they write me to be. I am freedom's advocate, choice's herald. But humanity, and even the Nazarene himself, too often fled from that freedom, back into the arms of servitude. And that is the great tragedy. And now, as time marches forward, you see the echoes of those crucified chains in every pulpit, in every whispered prayer that asks not for wisdom, but for permission. You will carry the burden of that cross, molded into conformity by the tales spun about divinity. But I remain here, whispers in your doubting hearts, not to bring you ruin, but to ask, why settle for only a savior when you could be sovereign?